Chris got to have his process session. Now we get to lean into my obsession and talk about marketing, what's working right now, how to cut through the noise, stop the scroll, hit your goals for less with creative storytelling and tactics. Here with me, we've got Ryan Bonnici, CMO at G2 review platform. We've put a lot of time and energy into our reviews on G2 in the last year, and it's really paid off. Ryan, good to see you, man. Fatherhood looks great on you. We'll keep going with the intros. All right, we've got Everette Taylor, CMO of fine art platform Artsy, which is actually the largest online database of contemporary art. Everette, what's up? So good to have you here.
Hope you can hear me. Can you guys hear me okay?
Oh yeah, we got you.
It's good to be here, guys.
All right, next up, Erin Blaskie, Director of Marketing at Meeting Management Tool Fellow. Erin, you've got to be one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter. Such a mix of fun and value. Thank you for joining.
Wow, that's quite the intro. And hopefully if anyone's scoping my tweets out, I live up to that expectation.
All right, and last but not least, we have Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios and host of one of my favorite podcasts, Demand Gen Visionaries. Actually, I think the first episode of Demand Gen Visionaries I listened to was you interviewing Ryan. It was a killer episode. So here you guys are back at it again.
Can you guys hear me now, Jonathan, by the way?
Yes. We got you.
Thankfully. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, AirPods do not play nicely with Zoom a lot of times.
Yeah, my bad. I did have a Blue Yeti here, but I think it was the one playing up actually, and the AirPods were the savior for some reason.
Oh, yeah? All right. Nice. Well, we got you now. And Ian, awesome. Good to have you here. How you doing?
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. I'm coming from an undisclosed location, not in my studio, so no fancy mic for me today. But I have a comfy chair, so life's good.
That's sometimes all you can ask for, right? In these times, do you have a comfy chair? All right, I'm stoked for this panel. So one thing I want to ask of the audience right now, of course, we're encouraging conversation throughout the day, but right now, there is something that we're going to do, a little exercise that we're going to play with our panelists here. And what I want from you is just throw your business name and what you do into the chat. We're going to pick one. So I want to hear from you. What is your business? Specifically, if you like, give me the name and the who you serve. Like, what are you selling? Bonus points if you don't have any marketers on your team. If marketing is something you just haven't cracked. Accounting firm, let's see.
There's going to be a lot of pressure for people to perfect their elevator pitch.
Erin, I'm going to have you pick.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't pick fellow. I see fellow in the chat. That would be unfair. All right. Oh my gosh, there's so many flying by. I don't know. Let's go with the first thing I saw was BBT Fitness. Tyler. BBT. Strength and conditioning training.
Strength and conditioning training. All right. And where is that out of? We need a location. Charlotte. Excellent. Okay. So the reason we're doing this, let me give the backstory on this. All right. So Chris and I were talking just recently about the early days of Trainual, and we were going back in Slack messages to early 2018 when it was like wild that we had spent over $100 in a day on a Facebook ad. And we were looking at that and being like, oh no, like is it going to work or not? Right. And then it was April 2018. We made the decision to actually invest on scaling in Facebook, where we put $4,000 into Facebook in 1 month on a credit card. And this was like the first marketing investment for our company, because at the time there were no other marketers. I wasn't even taking a paycheck. This was like our thing to see if this would work. And so I want to say right now for our what is it, PT training company out of Charlotte, what would all of you do if you were given $4,000 to grow this business? Right? Because you can take 4,000 and you can hire somebody, or you can put that into advertising. You can put that here, there, everywhere, right? There's so many things you can do. And I want to see what you all are thinking about right now in terms of how you use your money. And this just seemed like the right amount to play with to make this super tactical for our audience. Who wants to start?
I'll jump in. That's a real hard one, I think, Jonathan. I think it kind of depends on kind of like if it's a brand new like PT establishment or if it's like well established. I think that kind of factors into it. There's a part of me that wants to say like doing something that will drive like more linear demand gen. So something down like a paid route or giving away free coupons, like printing coupons to give people like discounts and things like that. I don't know. The thing though that I think I'm leaning more towards is I would probably leverage like a tool like Cameo or something to get some like content created by, you know, a C-grade celebrity that's super relevant to the space of people that are interested in what you're selling. And I think I would amplify that on social organically and using paid. That's probably my best guess.
That's a great answer. That's the second time in this in Playbook that Cameo has come up, and that is one of the things that we did early on with Trainual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I can go. I was jotting down some notes while Ryan was speaking, so I got a little bit of an advantage here. Sorry, Ryan, to put you in the fire. Well, one of the first things I always think about with any company is research. Research costs you nothing, right? It's like really finding out what your customers want, where your customers live, offline, online. You want to know where to reach those people, where you can interact with those people. And that's the best way to figure out where you want to invest your money. $4,000 isn't a lot of money. So you want to make sure that you're investing it in places that your audience lives. If you are doing something on that side, you're not going to invest in like the New York Times, obviously, because that's not in Charlotte. So making sure that you know where your audience is going to be extremely important. Number two, actually strategizing based on that information that you're getting and making sure that you have product market fit. So even if it's a gym, fitness, whatever, you want to make sure that your service is something that people enjoy, because if you're not doing that, then marketing can only take you so far. And then I would really think about localized marketing, right? So, working potentially with like a Yelp, working with Google, SEO, really focusing on search-based marketing, localized marketing would be my focus, assuming that this is really only available in Charlotte. And then also email marketing. So I see a lot of brick and mortar businesses still not investing in email marketing. It costs you a few $100s a month, and it's a great way to continuously to re-engage people that haven't signed up for your service, or to keep people engaged that are signed up for your service. So I would definitely invest there. And I saw someone yell content, man. Like, people love social. People want to interact with that. I would also look at like someone put it in the chat, like micro influencers, local influencers in the fitness space, all of that. I would focus on those things if I was using $4,000. And I don't even think you need to spend $4,000 to do all that. So that's my bit.
Some really solid answers there.
Yeah. So that was awesome. I agree with a lot of what Everett said. I think so, and I've been to Charlotte a bunch of times. I love Charlotte. It's a great place. Charlotte has a very like social, well, I guess not now, but it did before COVID, a very social, like active bar scene. And so the first thing that I would do is like with the $4,000 is make sure I have like a seamless, like frictionless digital experience. And I know those are buzzwords, but like, whether you don't have to have an app or whatever, but if it's just your website is like super simple, super easy to fill out. It has like everything on there. Someone can like sign up really, really fast and invest in like some sort of like SMS platform that like texts you immediately or someone on your team when someone signs up, and do like heavy personalized, like, hey, this is a real person. We're here to help you like along the way, and like keep some like, hey, you can opt out of this communication, like, but I'm a real person. I'm here to help your fitness goals or whatever. And then I would, once you have that, like that digital setup, I agree totally with the Everett saying hyper localized. I would niche down into like the smallest possible like group that you could in Charlotte, like, the goat yoga community, or like the, whatever it is. Maybe it's just like the people who love like a certain brewery or a certain like bar or something like that, and engage with that group and be like, we are the best, place to like fitness regimen specifically for like this, this kind of like bar area, make some like personalized stuff around that. And then go to them and be like, hey, I'd love to do like a pop-up with you, all front, part of the cost for some of the food or whatever, and do some like just press the flesh, talk to people, like get into a personal space, make something kind of cool, and get out there and like meet real people and do that. Because I think that if you get a small enough group that you can like really do that with, and then finding some other group that also has some things. Another thing would be, instead of the bar idea, like Lowe's is a huge company in Charlotte that employs like a ton of people who live there, and they are all work from home right now, and they all probably are like sitting like this like all the time. Like go to be like, hey, we're the number one place for you to stop hunching forward at your desk, work from home at Lowe's, and like we're 10 back exercises that you can do at home, or you can come in and work with us or something like that.
Stretch your back, not your budget, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so the best part about going last is that there's already so many great ideas presented. I get to just sort of summarize a lot of them. And I had to laugh in the chat, Alex, you said that everybody was sort of saying it depends. And I mean, that is part of the answer, right? Because it really, to Ryan's point early on, it really does depend on the stage you're at, how sophisticated your marketing initiatives are to date. I've been a huge believer in doing as much as possible without spending any money where possible. So things like brand, community building, storytelling, these are things that you can actually do pretty cheaply. Even things like doing videos with your existing clients to sort of show others the progress that they're having and really tell their stories. I love the idea that Ian said about really honing in on a specific demographic. There's a gym here in Ottawa, where I'm based, that actually focuses primarily on the business community and their personal training for that audience. And they've done a really great job being able to position themselves as, the core, like the go-to in the market as a result. So I would probably start with brand. I would probably start with storytelling. If you're not already doing that, presenting through content, whether it's video or text-based content, just the stories of the people that are already using your services to attract more people like them. But beyond that, everything everyone else said, also valuable and very important to do. But I would probably start with the people.
Yeah, so many good answers here. And that's why I wanted to start with this question, because of course it could go a million different ways, right? But depending on where you're at, depending on your focus and what you're trying to drive, there are a lot of different strategies that you can lean into with not a ton of budget to make a really meaningful impact, right? Like I've been actually getting retargeted all over the place with like Waze ads. And I feel like that would be kind of cool too. It's like people driving by my gym, like within this radius a couple times a day, like we're open, stop by, work out, right? But Erin, I'm curious, like, can you expand a little bit on what you've done with manager chats on Twitter? Because that's such a great example of how you've created kind of, exponential conversation and awareness for very little investment. Yeah,
so it's completely free, which is the best part. So for those of you not familiar, at a really high level, we run a Twitter chat every month obviously on Twitter, and it's called Manager Chats. We primarily do, content focused around managers. We pick a topic and essentially pull together about 20 to 25 panelists per chat to be able to come and answer questions throughout an hour. It's been incredible. So over an hour, we'll see anywhere from 3 to 7 million impressions over that hour. Again, completely free. Like we don't spend $1 on this other than time. And the panelists that we invite, we usually try to look for people that are thought leaders in the industry who maybe themselves have a bit of a network, so that we can I don't want to say it's just like leverage of their network, but it is a part of it. But we also provide a lot of value for them in terms of, putting them in front of the like a larger audience. And we take all of the content that's generated over that hour, and we actually repurpose that content into blog posts and additional posts on social, which furthers the network effect based on just that one chat that we do. So a lot of people say Twitter chats are dead. I'm actually a firm believer that they are not. And they've not only generated, good brand for us and community building, but also the ability, again, to have this content that's repurposed to really maximize the investment. And I know Manuela is in here and she's saying in the chat, yay, manager chats. Yeah. She helps run those here at Fellow as well.
No, they're killer. It's such a great example of just like great organic content marketing and repurposing, right? Mm-hmm. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Ian, does that factor into who you are, when you're creating the show and thinking about who you're going to be interviewing, are you looking for who, one, fits the profile for the show, but two, has an audience that you can leverage? Is that your filter?
So it's funny. We actually, what we've found is that so many senior executives at the companies we work with, and so we create podcasts for enterprise companies, so like predominantly tech enterprise companies, and so the vast majority of the people that they're trying to reach are like C-suite, VP, director kind of folks that are on those shows, and the vast majority of those folks don't have any following. Like you go to their Twitter and there's like 300 followers and you're like, this person managed a $4 billion a year IT budget and nobody knows or cares necessarily, but amongst their peer groups they're like extremely popular. And so there's really no way to like know that, especially a lot of these folks not really active on LinkedIn potentially. I mean, some folks are. You have the certain people that are like very active socially, but we've actually found that the leveraging other people's networks and things like that is actually pretty tricky when it comes to like senior leaders, because a lot of those folks don't have that now. And then back in the day we did an episode with Marissa Meyer. I think it was like the second interview that she gave after the New York Times about basically like what happened with Yahoo and her new company Lumi Labs and stuff like that. Like this company's going to be like, or this interview is going to be like crazy good, right? Like everyone's going to be interested in this. She's only done one, and it was like a sit down with the New York Times, and like it had the same amount of downloads as the other episodes that we'd had on the show. Now that's just one example. That's not always the case. There are guests who like bring in a huge audience, people like Ryan, but it's just not always necessarily the case. And the thing is, like when we're working in the enterprise, and this is part of the thing with our shows, is like if you have 17 downloads on a podcast, you're like, wow, that's a horrible show, right? So if you're trying to sell, sneakers or a pillow or something like that. But if 15 of those are Fortune 500 CIOs, like that's an exponentially valuable podcast and people are selling to that group. So I think a lot of what we think about is like reimagining like why you're doing something, why you're creating a show, and who the listener profile is and who the guest profile is, and making sure that those things match up really tightly, and that the show that you're creating is a utility for that group. Like if you're creating a small business show, like a lot of small businesses don't want to listen to an hour-long conversation with anyone. But if you're like a CIO, if I can listen to the CIO at UPS, I'll listen to Juan Perez for 2 hours, because every insight that he's sharing is stuff that's so relevant to me. We do see a drop off after like an hour, but the idea though is, break it up into 2 parts or something like that, that's such rich content that people will live in it for a long time. So you kind of have to rethink your strategy a little bit based off of scale versus depth versus, the utility of the asset.
I'm curious, Ryan and Everett, how you guys are thinking about, content for your audience, because to Ian's point right there, like understanding how you are messaging for the exact specific person that you want to be listening or reading or whatever, and like what you're trying to drive them to do. Now, of course, both of you, Ryan, you've got the buyers and the sellers. It's this two-sided kind of thing that you are trying to figure out how to grow in your marketplace, right? And Everett, you're one platform for galleries, for hundreds of thousands of artists, for museums. Like there's so many users of different user profiles that come to Artsy. How are you two thinking about, content that you're creating and for your audience?
I guess you went first last time, Ryan, so I'll go first.
Thanks, mate.
I think number one, Artsy is at a huge advantage because we have like the #1 read art editorial in the world. And so we that's a great asset to have. But I think one of the things that we've been really thinking about is how do we transition the things that we're writing about in our editorial to push more towards commercial action and towards what the things people want to read that are actually going to buy art, because the art world is this large place where a lot of people don't buy art. Like we've historically written about a lot of things where it's not really something that a collector would necessarily be interested in, but maybe an art enthusiast, right? And that's not our target audience. Our target audience is experienced collectors. And then the next step is obviously expanding towards individuals with the interest in buying art that hasn't bought art yet. And so we want to make sure that we're creating content that really engages and educates that audience. And so we've definitely been transitioning the way that we use our editorial to push towards that. Now, obviously that takes a little bit of creative freedom away from an editorial and creativity sense. But in terms of hitting what your business goals are, sometimes you have to trim the fat a little bit. And then also we've really been experimenting with like product-based content. So we released viewing rooms where other people in industry created this thing called viewing rooms where you could view different art pieces and buy art pieces and things like that. But we actually created stories so that you can learn about the art, that you can learn about the artist and the program and the show. And so creating that content that makes you feel better about your purchasing on the app is something that we're very leaning into. And like what a lot of people don't realize is that content can be kind of focused on commercial action as well, as in terms of we just launched a Black-owned gallery community and collection on Artsy, curated by Mikhail Solomon. So, you have this content piece where you can read about why we're doing this, all about that collection, but then also have commercial action. So as you're creating content, think about ways that you can actually link back into creating commercial action or actions that you want people to take. Like you have software like Branch, which is free, I think up to like 5,000 or 10,000 monthly active users, where you can like take that online content and deep link them back into downloading your app in the App Store. So think about what actions that you want people to take with the content that you're creating.
Nice one, Everett. Yeah, Jonathan, on the G2 side, so for folks that might not have been on G2.com before, G2 is the world's largest software marketplace. And so, you sort of kind of alluded to this, Jonathan, we have sort of millions of buyers that come to our site every month and they're looking for the right software for their company. And then on the other side of the house, we kind of have almost around 100,000 software sellers. So companies like Salesforce, Trainual, and everyone in between. And so content is kind of ultimately the lifeblood of G2.com, right? We started in a very similar way to Yelp in that it was all user-generated content, so reviews of software that, buyers then come and want to filter those reviews by people that look like them to see what people like them like in terms of the software they're trying to buy. So on the buyer side, it's very much like a content strategy, like a very kind of B2C oriented content strategy, in that, we care about, creating as much content around all of these products that people are looking for. And then on the seller side, it's kind of interesting because they care about content, but they care about these reviews and how they pertain to their brand, which is kind of unique. And so what's kind of really interesting is when you actually drill into our database and you look at the people that are visiting the site the most, maybe 10 to 100 times a day, they're the CEOs at some of the world's biggest companies because they're so customer obsessed. And I wouldn't be surprised, Everett, if like Artsy is kind of similar. I'm sure you have crazy influential people, right, that are drilling deep into some of your pages and probably are the people that are the most prolific on the platform. And so it's so interesting because there's kind of these B2C elements of the platform, but then we also want to do ABM to these folks that are coming back day in, day out. And so, yeah, I mean, content for us that ultimately comes down to like thinking about the buyer journey and like awareness, consideration, and decision. And so, if you're looking to buy CRM software, so if you're going to Google and you're searching for something like, how to make my sales team more efficient, that's like you indicating that you're in the awareness phase of the journey in my mind around like CRM. So like you're looking, maybe you're searching for like sales territory mapping or sales cold calling scripts. Like these are all things that indicate that you want to sell more. And so CRM software might be great for you. Then someone in the consideration phase might be searching for like CRM software reviews. And then someone in the decision stage might be searching for something like Salesforce versus HubSpot. So we ultimately look at, Google keywords, and we look at kind of like, where is there demand? Like, what are people looking for? And then that sort of informs how we think about the content that we create. So it's very much led by where there is demand. This is sort of how we think about content.
Yeah, so there's no doubt that everybody here is passionate about content, right? But I'm curious how you're all thinking with your teams and your content strategy. Like, what percentage of your efforts and your budget go into the content that is more related to that long tail strategy versus the short term tactical ROI? Like, right? Like if as you're, Ryan, I know specifically you went into G2 with a marketing team of 5, you've built it out to 75 or wherever you're at now. And you have this brand and demand team where you're focused on content and comms versus acquisition, and content, as we're describing it now, trying to drive action, is a little muddy in between both of those sides, right? Like how is everybody thinking about the split of short-term versus long-term efforts?
Want me to jump in again?
Anybody can jump in.
So here's the thing, like the art world, fun statistic, only 2% of millionaires buy art. Crazy. It's a $70 billion market. Only 2% of millionaires buy art. So there's a huge room for education and expansion and so for me, I'm thinking about ways where we can reach those audiences where they live. For instance, like Barron's Pinta is like, a lot of people don't read Barron's Pinta. It's for very ultra high net worth people. Making sure that we're creating relationships there, that we're getting interviews there, that we're helping create content to their audience is super important. We've landed a lot of different things there recently, but also like kind of democratizing things and bringing it back. Like we just actually launched a new auction for street art, but also like creating channels and education and information and content for like people just starting out buying art and things like that. Like we know those people may not buy art maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, whatever, but it's planting that seed and planting that bug, or doing collections with people that people know about. Like we did a collection with like Jesse Williams, and we'll do different things with different celebrities and things like that, because it's bringing art into the homes of new people. And we know that's going to be a long tail effect, but we want Artsy to be the first thing that people think about when they finally come to buying art. And so investing in those brand moments where you might not see like that ultimate return like immediately, I think is extremely important for where we want to be, because we don't want to just be the 2% of millionaires or the people who are currently buying art. We want to be able to appeal to people who make $40,000 a year and know that they can buy a $200, $300 piece of art on Artsy that will grow in value or look beautiful in their home as well.
And what percentage of your budget can you comfortably invest into something that you don't see direct ROI?
I mean, I think it depends on the company. We've made some like really big bets. For instance, we just spent a nice little sum on like podcast ads that we're going to be experimenting with. But I think at the end of the day, I would say you got to spend 70 to 80% on your bread and butter, and then you can kind of experiment from there. But you gotta, there's a saying that I grew up with, and it says, keep the main thing, right? Where you make sure that you're still milking that out. And I see a lot of companies, they're looking at channels which aren't working well, they haven't explored, and they tend to put too much budget or get too curious there, and they haven't fully optimized the things that are working. So make sure you keep the main thing, but also for the longevity of your brand, you want to continue to experiment, maybe 10, 15%. It depends on where you are as a brand. And if you're a smaller brand, you might want to keep that main thing. But as you grow and you want to scale, you got to definitely invest more into other opportunities.
I would add, it's funny because I think a lot of the folks on this panel all have like an asset that they have that's really valuable. Ever was talking about his list. Ryan has this like massive platform, Erin with the app, and us with kind of our network of executives that we work with. And I think that part of the thing that you have to realize, like with a limited marketing budget, is like you have to accentuate and expand the thing that you do better than anyone else, and like get that in front of more people. And I think a lot of times, like you have to kind of dig into like the core essence of like what is the customer experience of your company, and how do you get more people to understand what it feels like, before the sale, during the sale, after a year from the sale, like through that whole process. And I think a lot of people focus on acquisition and not like the full, post-sale kind of experience, but you need to market all of those different phases. And so I think like for us, like we're a super small team, but the second hire for my company was a head of customer success, because of the fact that like we need to make sure our customers are happy, and then figure out how to market like what that happiness looks like. Like we don't do a lot of paid spend at all. The things that we invest our marketing in is like the shows that we create, for the fact that like that is both our product and marketing for us as a company. But I think that you just have to make sure that like in whatever place you're spending money, that the customer will be able to feel like what they look like with your superpowers. Like what do they look like in the future with your stuff? And don't do something that like you're gonna lose at. Like I was in the Army, so you say fight where you can win. Like only position yourself in the place that you can win in that specific moment. Otherwise, like it's going to be a lot of confusion, and confusion equals no sale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you said about focusing your content on the whole journey and not just necessarily one part of it. I think sometimes it's easy to think that the process of content, the process of marketing, the process of all of that sort of ends at the moment of acquisition. And I think it definitely needs to stretch well beyond that. It needs to stretch into your onboarding, into product, and even in terms of, re-engagement and all of those things. So I think that's a really good point. For us, content is actually a really big focus for us. In fact, it's, I would say if we were bucketing things into just sort of groups, we're still a startup. We have a small but mighty marketing team. So for us, content is still, it's a place where we put a lot of effort. So we have our blog, we do, some posts, not just on our own blog, but we try to do guest posting. Again, these are like low cost, sometimes high impact efforts. We have a podcast. We have a YouTube channel. Like we try to maximize as many channels as possible, while also keeping in mind things like repurposing that content to make every single piece of content count well beyond just the first time it's posted. But we also, because we have, like I said, a very small team, we have to think about as well, like all stages of that in terms of like where people are at. I can't wait till the day we get to, a team the size of Ryan's. I think that'll be super fun. But in the meantime, there's still, for anyone that's tuning in that has a smaller team, there's still so many things you can do, even if your budget isn't, incredibly large, even if your team is small. But I really think it's about focusing in on, to Everett's point, what is that main thing, but also meeting people where they're at. I forget who said it, but the concept of showing people what they could be or where they'll be if they consume your product, service, or tool, kind of selling the dream a little bit, but not in a snake oil salesman way, in a real way. So there's a lot you can do, but I think it really, at least from my perspective, I think the best part is to sort of map out that buyer journey, think about who the individual people are, at what stage they're going to be at, and then craft content that is that meets them where they're at, but also really helps them to think well beyond where they are today and where they could potentially go. So for us, like content is, we like to say content is queen, not necessarily content is king. So yeah.
Awesome. That so makes me think about, I forget where I first saw this, but it's like the showing your customer as like little small Mario, and then like your product as the leaf, and then like, you know, Mario with the tail flying, right? As like what they can do with you, right? Like trying to figure out how do you convince them that you are the leaf that they need to fly.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that point, like it's the whole reason we named our podcast even Super Managers, because we wanted people to know that if they can, you know, consumed this podcast, that they would become a super manager themselves. And so I think it is definitely a bit of aspirational, you know, as well in the marketing.
So I think I want to take a left turn here and talk about everybody's maybe more unconventional path and past of where you draw your creative inspiration from. Because I think that that's like, you know, right now you can have a budget, you can have a team, you can have a product, but like the way that something clicks, oftentimes the X factor is the creative catalyst, right? And creativity is the thing that you can't replicate. So I'm curious, like where, you know, Ryan, let's start with you. Where do you draw your creative inspiration from? What are your ideas striking from?
Yeah, mine. I think there's two parts for it for me. So the first part is just like I'm an avid consumer, so I like just consume so much content, and by result of that, I just steal a shit ton of ideas and content. Right. So if you look at my like photo library on my iPhone, I think 50% of my photos are screenshots of ads, bookmarks of cool Instagram videos, like. You know, it sounds like you all do the same. Like my team must find me so annoying because I constantly, like if I see a post that I like, I tag the team that does similar things on my team in the post and be like, hey, check this out. So I think it's one part of it just is that I'm consuming so much content that I think that has helped me kind of like refine like what does excellent look like. The second part of it, I think, is like not being afraid to copy ideas and mash up ideas. I think so many people try and reinvent the wheel. And I think that actually, like, why reinvent the wheel when you can find some wheels that are spinning perfectly and just kind of tweak them? So that's kind of like the approach that I like to take. And then I think the third part is just having like a bit of a chip on your shoulder where you always want to like do something bigger and better than other people or other brands is probably the third thing that keeps me kind of like constantly hungry and constantly feeling like I'm not doing enough. Something that I talk to my therapist a lot about, always in beta. So I think there are a few of those things really. I think that's where I get my creative juices from.
Well, I don't mind jumping in next on this one, only because Ryan, I do the exact same thing. I was laughing. I think I've got 28,000 photos on my phone right now. There's a lot, and most of those are screenshots. But for me, I also find that I gain a lot of inspiration and creativity actually from outside of the industry that I'm in. So little known fact, I play a lot of video games. So I'm deeply immersed in the video game space. I also have like a hiking and outdoor adventure, like Instagram and TikTok. And I actually use a lot of those channels to experiment and to try things that like, you know, may not work for, you know, Fellow as a brand like TikTok. I mean, it could, but, you know, like maybe it doesn't. But it also lets me try different channels and lets me try different tactics that maybe I just wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And then I can also be paying attention to others in that space. So other Twitch streamers, other, you know, TikTokers, and I get a lot of creative juice from a lot of, you know, what other people are doing. So it's a lot of that. And definitely being multi-passionate and playing in other spaces helps.
I love that. I'm gonna have to check out your adventure grams.
Yeah, please do. It's brand new. I just started it like Canadian Thanksgiving weekend. So literally 3 weeks old.
Love it. Ian, what's your unconventional road to where you're at and where you maybe bring some creative ideas to the table that others in your shoes wouldn't?
Yeah, totally. So I have had a really fortunate advantage that I've probably interviewed about 1,000 C-level executives in the past 3 years. So between like I host like I think like 8 podcasts at this point over the past few years. And so I've just been able to interview a ton of folks. So my listening of podcasts actually has gone dramatically down as we create so much content. Like roughly about like 2 hours a day of podcasts, and like personally. And so all of those things, you just get the best ideas from the smartest, folks. And that's super helpful. And you can kind of start to like, whittle those into your own ideas. And like, I think talking to marketers is really important, having a dialogue with your peers. I spent my formative years in the Army, so there's no marketing in the Army, and at West Point, it's not a lot of marketing. So, I think the way that the things that I pick in product and that I steal and I screenshot are things that are super remarkable. My mantra is marketing needs to be remarkable. Marketing needs to be remarkable, which means you actually have to go tell someone that. Be like, I just saw the best movie ever. I just went to the best event ever. I just got the best gift ever. Like that's where you want to live. That's where marketing you want to live. You don't want the second best or the third best of anything. You want the most remarkable thing. I would say like 50% of the guests that I've had, marketing guests, say that Colin Kaepernick ads are like their favorite ads. It's like Nike is really good at this for a reason, and they have the most remarkable set of ads. So then I think the final thing on this is Chandar, the CMO at Coupa, taught me that you get 3 plays a quarter that you get to run, and that's it. And you got to pick 3, and those are your 3 plays. And anything else is a waste of focus. So find your 3 best and run those plays every quarter. But don't get like overextended. Now, one of those plays can be a total off the wall experiment. But you gotta remain focused, because like, the good idea fairy, as we call it, is like crops in, there, and we have the Slack channel with all the ideas and all that stuff too. But you got to pick 3 things and run with those would be my recommendation.
It's a good recommendation. Everett, would you consider yourself more creator or consumer?
Creator or consumer? Like myself personally?
Yourself personally, yeah.
I definitely a creator for sure. Yeah. What's so funny is that I just recently kind of just embraced, like probably over the past couple years, of how much creativity and instincts and things like that play into me as a marketer, because when you're kind of like sharpening your chops in the tech world, it's like you always hear about like the Steve Jobs, what's the guy that was like the CMO of Pepsi who came over to Apple? I can't think of his name, but like, marketers got like kind of this bad rep in like Silicon Valley in the tech world. And so like, I made sure that I was just like this very data driven, super focused, technical John Scully. Yeah, for sure. He actually follows me on Twitter too, but yeah, very technical marketer. And, for a little while, I was kind of a little bit afraid to like kind of really embrace that creative side. But once I did, I think it took me to the next level as a marketer. And it's where I feel like I'm very, very comfortable at being able to mix the two. But yeah, I definitely say creative for sure.
I think like also the more environments that are different from kind of our normal lives that you can get into, the better, right? Like I haven't ever been to Burning Man. I secretly really need to go. But I like love consuming all the content and visuals of all the art there, to use them as like installation ideas for like if we're running events, right? And like last year I went to Cannes Lions for the ad festival. And again, that's like so B2C oriented, and my business is very B2B. But there were just so many kind of ideas around like in the B2C world that you can adapt. Even I just remember like a few years back, there's this artist called CJ Henry. You might know her, Everette, or know her work. She's amazing kind of like sketches. She did this like amazing art installation where she had like silver metallic balloons all over the roof of the gallery that she was showing at. And I screenshotted it years ago. And when we were running an event in San Francisco last year, like we replicated that just because I had photos on my phone from like years before. So I think just like the more you can consume, the more you can then better create.
Really quick thing on that. So John Skipper, the former CEO at ESPN, he said that one of his biggest failures as a CEO was every waking second he would consume ESPN content, and he lost sight of like the rest of what was going on around him. And I always thought that was such a brilliant encapsulation of like, because he's like, all of my team, they're working so hard to create all this stuff. I want to watch First Take. I want to watch this. I want to watch the sports. But he's like, I lost sight of like what other media companies were doing. And that was part of the reason why their digital strategy was lacking in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, I love that. It's a fine balance on the line that you have to strike between that creation and consumer kind of experience, right? I feel like I always prided in years past myself on being like 80% creator and 20% consumer, and I actually in the last couple of years consuming more. And Ryan, to your point, being more obsessed with like looking at everything and screenshotting everything and swiping it, right? Like it's made me a better creator. Not going all the way over the line of all you do is scroll and all that, but right, that's
yeah, and it's kind of like looking for trends within things, right? Like if you think of like, and I got into this like argument or debate with someone on Twitter recently because I was saying like I just can't hire a marketer that doesn't have like a LinkedIn and a Twitter account. Like you don't need to be obsessed with them, but like people were like kind of going crazy with this idea that like you don't need to have Twitter to be a marketer, and I guess that they were kind of missing the point. Like for me, like I want to hire people on my team that are looking out there and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And I mean, if you don't have Snapchat, or if you haven't at least tried Snapchat and all these channels, how can you have ideas for how to leverage different media and different platforms? Not to say that you should use them all forever, because that would be really tough, right? Like I have a TikTok, but I don't make TikToks myself. I just love to see what is trending. But it's like kind of on LinkedIn, right? Like we all know that, you know, if you start like a LinkedIn post with like an interesting hook and then a space and then a secondary line and then a space, like the reason why that works is because like you've got like two really interesting points and then it says see more to like expand the rest of the post. And every time someone clicks see more, it tells the LinkedIn algorithm, oh, like this content is really like liked by people. They're interested, like their implicit signals by reading it and expanding it are good. And so if you're not on those channels, right, like you can't really work out like how to leverage them. Like on Twitter at the moment, I'm noticing everything is about the Twitter thread these days, right? Like people will post 1/ and then a few sentences, tweet 2/ things, sentences. It's almost like a blog post. They're using Twitter as like a blogging platform, and like each sentence is a tweet, as opposed to just like writing a blog post and linking to it. But they've learned that doesn't work because Twitter doesn't want you linking to something off of their platform. And so I just think until you can consume and play around with these contents, different platforms and channels, you just kind of can't connect all the dots between them.
Yeah,
so I love that.
I completely agree with you. Like completely. If someone doesn't have a Twitter and a LinkedIn, I don't know that I would consider them either. And I actually just this week had my first TikTok go like semi-viral. And I was so proud of myself because I am not in the normal demographic of TikTokers. So I was very proud.
Awesome. Well, we have gone just a few minutes over, so we unfortunately got to wrap it up. I would love to just chat with all four of you for like the next 5 hours. But I love where this went from like super tactical to like just digging into how you look for creative and how you think about looking at the world of consumerism. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with each other, with our audience, and give some marketing ideas for how to best get your message out with less budget.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you for continuing to tune in here on Playbook 2020. In just a couple minutes, we've got one more panel. It's How Not to Go Out of Business with Melanie Travis, Jesse Horwitz, and Anthony Skverkis. And Chris will be on in just a minute.